Welcome to the Crowds Line College Football Podcast. This is Kevin Trimble, and I've got a guest today that I'm pretty excited about, and it's Conor Shea. And Conor Shea is a new contributor to LouisvilleSportsLive.net. And just this morning, Conor pushed out his first article, and it's got a lot of juice and moving the needle right now in Louisville, and more importantly, maybe in West Lafayette, Indiana. And the title of it is Louisville a lateral move from Purdue? And obviously, it's all in relation to Jeff Brom. We know about Jeff Brom. Is the head coach of Purdue. Louisville no longer has a head coach with the recent firing of Bobby Petrino. But, he's the favorite son. He's the odds-on favorite to take the job. Is it going to happen? Who knows? But there's some answers that people want. They say, is it from the Purdue perspective, that's just a lateral move. Why would he go there? Well, I'm going to go to Conor Shea because he has some new ideas. Conor, how you doing?
I'm good. How's it going?
Wonderful. Hey, Conor, I'll tell you, why don't you just jump right in and tell us kind of what are your thoughts on this? Because I know the things you talked about were tradition, recent success, facilities, recruiting base, those types of things. But what was the impetus for you to write the article, and what was the baseline of your research? And tell us how you came up with this.
Sure. Well, yeah. So you said it yourself. Jeff Brom is clearly far and away the target. It's go big or go home on him here in Louisville. I'm not really sure if there's much of a plan B. So really, I just wanted to look at, since we all know that he's the target, what does it actually look like if you take Jeff Brom out of the equation? I wanted to see, what does it look like if you put Purdue and Louisville next to each other on paper, and just see, is it really a lateral move, as many are suggesting? I tried to take the biggest points that you can really argue for a program, just how to measure them, which is program tradition, recent success, recruiting base, conference affiliation, and facilities. While a lot of those are subjective, I tried to make it as objective as possible and tried to throw some stats in there. And what I found out was pretty interesting.
Well, it's my partner on the Crowds Line. You may have heard of him. His name is Coach Lou Holtz. Well, this week's show, which was our Week 12 show, we talked about the three openings right now. We talked about Kansas, talked about Maryland, and Louisville. But what Coach brought up, and you can watch it on thecrowdsline.com, is, hey, there's no such thing as a bad job. You take a bad job, you make it a good job, and the key is leadership. Well, as you know, people look at, our traditions, is a good job, something because they have more money, more facilities, or as you just said, tradition. And why don't you lead us through kind of your research on Purdue's tradition? And hey, maybe maybe they're thinking too far in the past and resting on some laurels that, hey, Louisville's not too far off.
Yeah, absolutely. When you really start to get into it with Purdue, a lot of their success actually came before the Korean War. I mean, they had a couple undefeated seasons, but not a whole lot to hang their hats on. They don't have any claimed national titles. And just when you compare the overall winning percentages of the program, Louisville sits at about 527, where Purdue's 520. I mean, it's almost identical, but they've been playing football for almost 30 years longer than U of L has. And since then, they do have a wonderful tradition in West Lafayette. They got a whole lot of fun things going on. They got the world's largest bass drum. They have the All-American Marching Band. But from what I looked at, not a whole lot of that is translated to the gridiron. Purdue, while they've gone to bowl games, U of L has actually gone to more, and that's even in the last 30 years, they've gone to just as many bowl games, if not more. They've won Heisman trophies. They won New Year's Six bowl games, where Purdue has not a whole lot of that at all. Actually, Purdue's last New Year's Six bowl win was the Peach Bowl in 1978. So that kind of gives you an idea of really how, for the lack of a better term, mediocre Purdue has been. And not to say that U of L has really been a football powerhouse for all these years. That's really kind of come into late, where they've kind of made a name for themselves, just moving through the Independence Conference through Conference USA all the way up to the ACC. But U of L has made a name for itself, and it just begs the question as to whether, tradition really gets you that far this day.
Well, I look at what you're talking about where you said before the Korean War. I know that in the 60s they didn't win a national championship. Obviously, as you know, the Korean War, 1950 to 1953. But what's very interesting, we talked about in our show before Ohio State played at Purdue. In 1968, Ohio State had a defensive backs coach named Lou Holtz, and what he found out, and I think he said it this way, he said, Coach Hayes left no ambiguity about my primary job, and that was to stop Purdue, because in 1967, I guess Purdue was slinging the ball when those in the Big Ten weren't. Obviously, later on, they had a fella named Bob Greasy, which they still talk about. They had another fella later, in much later, named Drew Brees. You heard about that guy. But as you said,
I think I've heard of him.
Yeah, and as you said, tradition and success. Well, maybe not so much. But let me ask you this though: what if, with your research, talk about resources? We talk about Big Ten. Oh, the Big Ten gets all this money, they have their own network. Well, talk about resources in a comparative. Is that a comparative advantage over Louisville, or is it pretty much even out?
Well, that's a good question. Just because there are a whole lot of resources, and just seeing the way that money has really grown in college athletics has just exploded the last couple of years with the TV market. And so that was really led by the SEC and the Big Ten getting their own networks and just bringing in fist over fist of money to those athletic departments. But according to the USA Today, they actually published all the athletic budgets in college football, for at least those that report. And so what I found there was that Louisville, they ranked 22nd in the country with a budget of about $125 million. But Purdue sits actually back at 46 with about $84 million. And a large part of that comes from Louisville's Adidas contract for the apparel deal. And so not a whole lot of people realize that while Purdue is, don't get me wrong, they're making a lot of money through that Big Ten network, Louisville still has a lot of resources and money coming in. And that's not even mentioning that the ACC network, which is set to launch next year, is just going to bring even more money for the schools in the ACC. So yeah, resources are a huge part of college football, and really how you can determine the success, just seeing where the money's moving. But these programs, they're in very competitive conferences. Just looking at the teams in each conference, the Big Ten, it really sits right behind the SEC as far as overall success. But from what I can tell, Purdue has not really contributed a whole lot to that success. And so for that, I kind of do put these teams on a level playing field. And when you just look at resources alone, Louisville does have a slight edge there.
One thing I also found interesting and kind of lead us through this is you did kind of a compare and contrast. You said recruiting bases, and that big body of water just north of downtown Louisville, the Ohio River, is pretty meaningful according to your research. Talk to us about the recruiting bases and if there is or is not a competitive advantage there.
Yeah, and it's the weirdest thing. I mean, a lot of people, when you look at Louisville and Kentucky, just as states themselves, they're very similar, farming backgrounds in the central Midwest. Everyone disputes over where Kentucky really is, whether they're in the South or the Midwest. But that Ohio River does the weirdest thing where it really does offset the Midwest from the South. And what that gives Louisville is it gives them brand recognition in the South. Just in the 2018 recruiting class alone, Louisville, they had 12 players signed from Florida and another 7 from Georgia. Purdue, they had 5 total from both of those states. And I mean, there's only 180 some odd miles between these schools, but for some reason, just the geographical, I guess, how you would name them and place them within their own regions really does determine what hotbeds that you can go into. I mean, Georgia and Florida are some of the best recruiting grounds in the entire country. And fortunate for Louisville, they have access to those.
Well, I always wonder, too, a lot of it we say, okay, it's recruiting base. But let's be honest. If you take, all right, who's the king of the Big Ten? Okay, you have a king, Ohio State, and then I guess the prince or the whatever you want to call it would be the team in Ann Arbor. But I think recruiting bases are almost by the head coach and where the head coach is comfortable. Has nothing to do with where the head coach is from. And it's where they're comfortable, where they have the contacts, where's the brand recognition. Because if you pull up the Ohio State roster right now, by the way, they're from everywhere. If you pull up the Alabama roster, like, you know how many people in the Alabama roster are from Alabama? Hardly any.
Exactly.
They go across the Pacific and, find this guy named Tua Tagovailoa, and what was even better is that, to his family, was able to, move to Alabama and find a job to set up a living. So his younger brother now plays in Alabama. So there's an Alabama recruit for the Crimson Tide. But wouldn't you say that recruiting bases, are probably, more a requirement for the schools that are trying to get up to that next level than they are for, say, you look at Clemson. You could say they have a recruiting base. You look at Georgia, you look at the South Carolina area, you look at Florida area, but their brand recognition, they'll have people from California. You look at Ohio State right now. One of the big, arguments is that they have a wide receiver. They have the number one wide receiver in the country is from the state of Texas, and he didn't go to Texas. He, is going to Ohio State. So it's kind of like brand name recognition takes away the requirement for a recruiting base, where the recruiting base, believe it or not, almost becomes campus. But as you said, that Ohio River, may have something to do with that Big Ten, because Purdue, as you know, depending on who you talk to, if there's somebody that is on Social Security, they'll say it's a football school. If you talk to somebody a little younger than that, they'll say, I think it's a basketball school. Now, Louisville, we talk about, 3 national championships, and I don't care what anybody says. We have 3 national championships, and I say we because I'm a born and raised native of the Commonwealth. But, Louisville's a basketball school, but guess what? Play some football too. We beat Rutgers that year. We beat UCF that year. Maybe we're a football school too, but we can't get across that last hurdle. So I really think about these recruiting bases, and I'm really looking forward to reading more of your work, but especially with the research you're doing. And right now, from what you're hearing back home, obviously we know Jeff Brom's the odds-on favorite. Now, is there any doubt in your mind if he's just say he's not he wants to stay? Say he wants to finish building what he's building. Who's number 2 and who's number 3? What are you hearing?
Well, it's interesting. They actually, so Bovada has been running the betting odds for the coaches who could be coming to Louisville. And they actually took that off the board today, which means that basically the number for Jeff Brom is astronomical. You're not going to make any money if you actually bet on him. But yesterday, while they were still up, the 3 most popular names that I was seeing was Ryan Day, which is, Ohio State's offensive coordinator, Neil Brown at Troy. He actually worked at University of Kentucky for a while, and then Brent Venables, the Clemson defensive coordinator. So really I'm hearing a lot about the 3 of those with Ohio State's Ryan Day. People are hesitant on that because, Louisville's, quite frankly, they've suffered quite a few black eyes lately just with all the scandals that have gone on. And bringing in somebody under Urban Meyer may not be the best look right now. And then who knows if Urban's going to hang around past this year, so they may just bump Ryan Day up there. Neil Brown at Troy, he's about to have them go into their 3rd season with double-digit wins, which is just unheard of, especially with a small school like that in the Sun Belt. But while he was at Kentucky, he said one time that Kentucky runs the show in this state, and I don't think a lot of U of L fans are going to forget that anytime soon. So who knows about that? Then you have Brent Venables at Clemson. Bill Snyder's things are getting a little rocky down there at Kansas State, and Brent Venables is a Kansas State guy, and he's really passed up on a lot of great jobs lately. So when you consider those 3 names, it makes Louisville fans want Jeff Brom even more, just because the fit is so right, and you can think of all these reasons that these other coaches may not be the right fit, but it's hard to argue against Jeff Brom.
Well, I think number 1, I think they got the AD correct. Dr. Bendapudi has said, okay, Vince, this is yours, you have it. So I think Vince Tyree will make the right decision. I think, as you said, it's Jeff Brom's to lose if he wants, but the thing is, that's not a bad thing. It's not like, one of the things I look after, and it bothers me sometimes when you go after the coach because of his playbook. You go after the coach because, he runs this wild offense, and it's, we're going to air it out. We're going to spread the field. We're going to do all these things on offense. Okay, well, what's he do on defense? Well, he doesn't spend much time on defense. Well, what's he do on special teams? Well, I don't know about that. I look at, take Jeff Brom. Jeff Brom is, he's seen the good and the bad. And a lot of people don't understand that you can learn as much from about things that you don't like as the things that you do like. And I think you look at the coaches he's been around, you look at the programs he's been around. Obviously, you talk about Howard Schnellenberger. He played for Howard Schnellenberger. He was down there helping coach at FAU, so he's been around. There's a guy that builds a program. And then, Coach Petrino. I'm not going to say Coach Petrino's a program builder. I never have said that. I think he's a great play caller. But in today's environment, you need someone that can build a culture, establish a process, and as my partner Lou Holtz says, it's about leadership. Now, don't worry, you say about Neil Brown, and he talks about Kentucky. Well, you know what? Our AD also went to Kentucky, and you know what? That didn't hold him back. So,
that's right.
So we're okay with that. I think the big piece, though, is when you take, my final two, obviously Brom number one, because I think he's learned enough, and he is what a lot of people don't understand. Put yourself in Jeff Brom's shoes, okay? He takes the Louisville job. Where do you go from there if things don't turn out? And what I mean by that is, you always hear the term, you can always come home. Well, the thing is Jeff Brom comes to Louisville and he goes 5 years of 8-4, 9-3, and 8-4. You know what? Fan base is going to get tired of that. Louisville has the expectations, for good reason, are a lot bigger right now. So the thing is Jeff Brom comes to Louisville. That means Jeff Brom's betting on Jeff Brom. And you know what? I call that, I don't want to use the term courageous, but that's a football coach that I want, because he's coming in and saying, hey, I'm betting on myself. And you look what Vince Tyree said. He said, I'm not, I'm working around these golden parachute contracts. Jeff Brom moves to Louisville. He's not going to leave Louisville for greener pastures, because, I'm here to tell you, I miss home every day, and there's no greener pastures than those in Louisville. But there's a guy going to bet on himself. But if for some reason he doesn't, I will tell you right now, my opinion, I got to meet Brent Venables this past spring, and I will tell you, you talk about a coach that's been around building a program. Yes, he's a defensive coordinator. He's got a defensive focus, but he's been there about 7-8 years at a school that has slowly built up, and they never, ever took a step back. And they know how to win big games, which, as you know, is big. Their recruiting is solid. They understand. He's seen a head coach that Dabo Swinney doesn't spend all his time with his nose in a Waffle House menu playbook on the sidelines. Dabo Swinney understands offense, defense, special teams, recruiting, management, marketing, all those things that are required to lead the program, and then obviously coach the coaches. And I think Jeff Brom has enough savvy right now and enough experience that, there could be some young hiccups, but the thing is that the one thing he doesn't have to do, and correct me if I'm wrong, and this is where I think is the advantage, is he doesn't have to win the fan base. One of the things you hear about, Coach Holtz says, any college president can name you the head coach. They can't name you the leader. I think Jeff Brom will, with his personality, with his passion, with his experience, I think he'll have no problem right off the bat saying, okay, you're the leader. We're following you. Show us where to go. And then the other one I say is Brent Venables. I like, don't get me wrong, Neil Brown, Boyle County High School, understands the air raid offense, was around with Hal Mummy, Mike Leach, that whole crew. Yep. But there's something about culture and process, and that's where I say Brom has that, because, he's a step ahead. But then you've got Brent Venables, I think, is number two, because he's seen how to build a winning program, vice just how to win football games. You see? So, well, listen, I will tell you, it has been, Conor, it's been great. And let me ask you, though, you got any questions about what's going on, or what I'm hearing from the people I get to work with about who's going to win this weekend? Who do you think is going to win? What's on your mind other than Louisville football this weekend?
Well, right now, really, the Pac-12 is a mess right now. So somebody has to win that. Pitt could potentially clinch the ACC Coastal this weekend. So I don't know what you've heard from Coach Holtz or anybody like that, but if you have the scoop, please let me know.
Well, Clint, I'm going to tell you right now, it's a big deal, and we didn't talk about it because we don't want to jinx them too bad. But my partner, Mark May, who is the 1980 Outland Trophy winner from Pitt, he was selected on December 2nd this year during the December 1st during the ACC championship game, he will be inducted into the 2018 class of ACC legends. Now, I know he didn't play in the ACC, but Pitt is in the ACC, so he's their inductee. And you can't write the script any better, because here you got Pitt right now. Pitt blew out Virginia Tech. If Pitt beats Wake Forest this weekend, they still have a chance. They got to beat Miami. They've got to win one of their next 2 games. If they win, they're playing Clemson in the ACC championship game. And I know everybody's going to call it a blowout, but the thing is for us at thecrowdsline.com and for the Crowdsline College Football Show with Lou Holtz and Mark May, it doesn't get any better than that, because if you go back to when Notre Dame played Pitt, you watch our show that week, Mark May gave a pep talk to Pitt, and I'm going to tell you, it worked. It worked for 50 minutes of the game, and then the wheels came off. But I'm going to tell you, that's exciting. I think Pitt's going to run. You look, they've had 2 200-yard rushers back-to-back this year. I'm real interested in Notre Dame-Syracuse, though. Notre Dame-Syracuse in Yankee Stadium. If you look at that game, that couple, probably the first week of the season, you looked at that and said, oh, this is going to be a warm-up game. Much like, as you know, the SEC this week is warm-up week. So, the mighty Bulldogs of the Citadel are going to Alabama. Liberty's playing Georgia. So don't be surprised if you think back to, I don't know, maybe September, people looked at the schedule and said, oh, Syracuse, that's our warm-up game before we play SEC. Well, Eric Dungy, Syracuse can play some football. We saw what happened when Louisville went up there. Obviously, Louisville didn't bring the effort with them, so Notre Dame will bring some effort. But they've got athletes. They can hit, they can throw, they can run, they can do it all. So my eyes are on that game. And I'll tell you another.
Absolutely.
What I'm real excited about, and I want your take on this. Everything I'm reading from down here, I'm read about back home every day, is when Vince Tyree made that decision on Sunday, everything I'm reading says that was the weight of the world off the shoulders, and it was an emotional burden taken off the entire football team. And I think it was Jody Demling said, I've never seen so much energy at practice as I saw this week. So, oh, by the way, we still got athletes that won a few games. Yes, Lamar's not there, but maybe NC State. I mean, you saw what they did against Wake Forest. What are you hearing about what's going to go on this weekend?
Yeah, and NC State's kind of a weird team to really get to know and understand this season, just because, they had that West Virginia game canceled at the beginning of the season, which I really think we would have had a better grasp of what kind of NC State team this was, but still haven't really figured them out. And, you talked about it earlier, just with the culture changing and what is needed for Louisville to get turned around. Having Petrino out of the building really has improved the culture from what I've heard. Now we'll see how that actually carries over, but by no means is this Louisville team without talent. I mean, just comparing them to Purdue's recruiting classes, so Bill Connolly, he does a S&P Plus analytics. For the 5-year recruiting rating for U of L, they rank 34th, and 2-year rating is 28th. So they got players on the team, and I think if Coach Ward can really get these players motivated, they might give NC State a run for their money. All the players are talking about how this is a 2-game season now from here on out, and they want to go 2-0. So I'm excited to see what they bring tomorrow.
Well, I'm excited what they're going to bring tomorrow, but I'm also excited because I'm going up there with my number one Louisville Cardinal fan. My son Mason will be his first ever home game at Louisville. He's a Marine kid, so he's lived all over the world, but he's the biggest Louisville homer ever. We're going to come up for the Kentucky game, and one of the things I was telling Coach and Mark is, I don't think, if you look back, I don't think Louisville's any worse than Tennessee, and you saw what they did to the Wildcats. The Wildcats are a tough team, but, Kentucky's kind of down. That Georgia game was a tough loss, but I think Louisville's focused on NC State. I think Ryan Finley's a great quarterback. He puts the ball in tight windows, but, can their defense keep up? And I don't think they can. Because you saw Wake Forest, they moved the ball. They came back and won. And so I'd be real interested what NC State is thinking too. What are they thinking about? Okay, we're going to take this Louisville team, because right now, there's not much. They're not very intimidating. But coming to Cardinal Stadium, I think it's going to be a great crowd of everybody supporting the Cards.
Yep.
And I'm looking for a win, so I know you are too. But I tell you, Conor, it's been great talking. I'm looking forward to your next article. Keep us posted, and everybody, and tell your friends they can hear us. This podcast on thecrowdsline.com will be put up, and they can download the crowdsline.com podcast on the podcast channel. And I look forward to talking to you again, and keep it up. And if there's anything we can do for you, you let us know.
Absolutely. Thanks so much for having me on.
All right. Have a good one, and have a great weekend. We'll talk to you soon.
All right. Sounds good.
This is Kevin Trimble from thecrowdsline.com and the Crowdsline College Football Show podcast. It's been great being with my friend Conor Shea. We look forward to talking to you next week.